Hi guys. So today I kind of just want to address a little bit of an unfortunate issue regarding the build. There seems to be there's two issues actually. The first one, and this is a bit more minor than the real problem, is the first one is Astromentis is significantly more expensive than what was advertised, and also just what we were expecting in general. I guess it kind of makes sense what ended up happening, but they removed MFing from the game, and because of that, there's just less of these on the market in general, right? There's significantly less of these on the market. Yeah, there's like you can see, there's only 45 online. In previous leagues, there'd be over 100. There'd be several more of these because MFers would just make these drop a lot more, and they would make these way cheaper. This just ended up being way more expensive than even I could have foreseen. I had done a lot of testing. I looked past at like four different leagues of Astromentus and just compared them side by side. And I kind of knew that it can get up to a divine, but I didn't think it would be more than that. It ended up being way more than that, almost two divines. Actually, it is two divines on average, which is really unfortunate. Also, Snowblind Grace is the five links are just not really available, like at all. I don't think there's a single five link of this. Yeah, there's not a single five link of this on the market. So that's really unfortunate, and that's even just like the smaller. These are just the smaller issues. The big and really the main issue is this doesn't work the way it's advertised. Let me actually move my camera down. Okay. This node right here, Avatar of the Wilds, is not working the way it says it does. You might read this and think to yourself, okay, so if I press Avatar of the Wilds, this ability right here, Unbound Avatar, I will always inflict Freeze, Shock, and Ignite. Meaning that I will, regardless of how much damage I do or the damage type that I'm dealing, your hits will always do Freeze, Shock, and Ignite. You would think that off reading that. That is actually not the case, unfortunately. What this is meaning to actually say is you have a 100% chance to Freeze, Shock, and Ignite, which is significantly different from your hits will always Freeze, Shock, and Ignite. What this actually means is you will not actually get a Ignite if you don't have any fire damage. You will not actually get a Freeze if you don't have any cold damage. You will not actually Shock if you don't have any lightning damage. Even if you are removing the actual portions of the life required for these thresholds to happen, right? You won't get those hits at all. At least when you first read this, this is not working the way that you would think it does. This entirely makes the build non-functional. Really, really unfortunate. The way that my build was supposed to work was I would stack lightning damage and I would force freezes and scorches even though I didn't have any cold or fire damage, or had very, very little, right? That was the plan from the very beginning, right? And as you can see, like I literally have no fire damage, right? I have way less cold damage. Actually, I had begun trying to find a way to fix this, but originally I had way less cold damage and I had way less fire damage. And so I was like, okay, I have some fire damage, I have some cold damage, there's a source of it. So theoretically, your hits always inflict Freeze, Shock, and Ignite. It doesn't matter, it will always happen, there's no problem. That is just not the case. The reality is you still need a solid amount of cold damage to actually freeze. You still need a solid amount of score to or ignite damage, or I guess fire damage, to actually inflict an ignite, which would instead inflict a scorch. That kind of breaks down the build if you can't really do these things. This just doesn't make it work. In the actual game, I was doing some testing with Charge Dash, right? I was getting hits off that was doing a large portion of a target's HP, and it wouldn't freeze. And I was really, really confused. Why wouldn't it freeze? I'm during Unbound, I can always freeze, shock, and ignite. It just doesn't, that it's not working. And upon some testing, I had realized something kind of important. You need to do the actual damage type required in that amount to actually inflict the freeze. It will not inflict freeze if you are not hitting that hard with the damage portion that it requires, right? At a baseline, that's how it works, right? That we already knew this, right? Freezes that would not have a duration of 0.3 seconds or below are not inflicted. That is baseline how that works. However, Avatar of the Wilds makes it sound like it doesn't matter if you don't have that much cold damage or you don't have that much fire damage for for the Scorch, right? As long as you are hitting hard enough to remove the certain percentage of life, you will inflict the freeze. That's what it makes it sound like. In reality, what's actually happening is you don't get the freeze at all. I can quickly show you. On like these easier enemies, you'll see that like it's not really doing anything. It doesn't really matter what's happening, right? But as you can see, when I go and I get like a large hit on the rare enemy, there was no freeze effect. And actually, I'm going to stack this up. I'm going to try to just get this to max, and I will actually demonstrate it on an enemy. And you can see I'm also still getting some freeze on some of the targets I'm currently going against, right? Because I'm getting crits off, and like sometimes it like does enough damage. And even more so, like when these enemies are dying, it's freezing, right? So it tells me that I do have enough damage to freeze in some cases, right? When I get a good roll on my cold damage and whatnot. But this is also like low level enemies and whatnot. So, but right here, here's a rare enemy. I'm gonna activate Unbound right here. I straight up killed the enemy. I never froze it. Even though I have Unbound Avatar active, I should have froze that target. Even though I straight up removed several chunks of its HP, not at a single point did it ever get frozen. Okay, so just testing, getting a quick little test out, right? I want to see will I freeze if I always inflict freeze, ignite, and shock on a target, right? On any old enemy, when I activate Unbound Avatar, I should freeze them, right? So here is an essence, right? Let's see what happens. I activate Unbound. Large hit right there, never froze it. During Unbound too, never froze the target. I should have froze it even because I removed a large chunk of its life. Right there I froze that target because I removed a large chunk of its life with the cold damage, but against the actual rare enemy right there, I didn't freeze it. And it's literally just because I didn't do enough cold damage with the hit portion of my attack to inflict freeze. It just didn't happen. I have to inflict a significantly harder freeze, or hit harder with my cold damage rather, to get that freeze effect. I didn't do that, so it just didn't happen, right? And that's really annoying. So I just wanted to make that video. I just wanted to get that out there. I'm sure other people maybe already found out about this. Maybe they kind of just assumed that it wouldn't work that way, right? But the wording makes it sound like it would do something completely different from the reality, and it's very disappointing. If you play this build, I am sorry that if you ran into this issue too and it wasn't working out for you and you're having a bad time, I apologize for that. That is just something that's unforeseen that I wouldn't have expected. There is still hope, however, if you do keep playing this build, or if you're interested in playing this build, the option instead is to still go Oath of Winter, still go Avatar of the Wilds, but instead you go Tinctures instead of getting Oath of Summer. And I was actually thinking about getting a Call of the Brotherhood, and then using a shield instead, right? And obviously you'll do significantly less damage in running this, but also this means that you can run a good Tincture. Tinctures are actually pretty good. You can get a lot of penetration or a lot of attack speed from these Tinctures, right? You get a lot of elemental damage with melee weapons. There's a one that gives a ridiculous amount of crit, more than the Diamond Flask. But what's unfortunate also is they kind of removed the attack speed thing here from that can be found on these flasks. So Silver Flask isn't as good anymore because of this. It's actually like a large nerf to Mage Blood and any other thing that uses flasks, because the attack speed that you got from here was actually pretty significant. That's gone now, but you can get that on Tinctures instead. So you can swap this around and find like a better setup here instead of using this Silver Flask or something. Maybe use another defensive flask. I don't know. There is other options there, but I had to change up the tree. I dropped the inherent attack speed. Dual wielding thing is doubled. That's unfortunate. That's a large damage multiplier. I had to drop ambidextrous, another large attack speed, more multiplier. I had to drop twin terrors. I had to lose so much damage because of this not working the way as intended because I have to go Badge of the Brotherhood in order to inflict the freeze. And at this point, now the damage would be higher enough to inflict freeze regardless. Now the gameplay would work as intended. You would be able to get easy frozen stacks, and you'd be able to actually freeze the targets. You'd actually be able to get rage too in this setup too, because I'm going rage on hit. You're not getting it much, but like obviously you're going to get the annoy eventually, and you'll get a lot more. You'll get max rage pretty quick. I still have this set to 15. And since I'm running tinctures, I'm actually getting pretty good benefit out of the tincture. It's staying up for a good amount of time as well. Even with the mana burn thing, it's also getting extra time on after your mana burn ends, right? Which is kind of nice. And also it ticks mana burn rate less, right? It's kind of nice. Obviously I can spec into like more mana burn stuff in the tree, right? But this is just the idea that I went with to kind of bandage the situation a bit. It's really unfortunate. I wish that it actually worked the way that it looked like it said it would work. It doesn't. I don't know why they didn't put the caveat in for the Unbound Avatar to instead say, like, if you have the damage to inflict a freeze, or actually, they already have a wording for this, hits that would do X, do this instead, right? That if they had said that and made it more direct, or if they changed it or added the caveat that said, hey, your hits always inflict freeze, shock, and ignite if your hits would have done so if you didn't crit, or something along the lines of, we want you to get the actual portion of damage required to inflict scorch, right? If they had said something like that and made it more obvious, that would have been better. But your hits always inflict freeze, shock, and ignite is a bit too direct. It kind of makes it sound like you don't need the damage types of freeze, of cold, of fire to actually inflict an ignite or a shock or a freeze or whatever, right? It just makes it sound better than it actually is. But in reality, you need baseline the cold damage, you need baseline the fire damage, and if you don't have those things, you just will never freeze, you will never inflict scorch, right? And this becomes a big issue on pinnacle bosses when you can't remove those certain portions of life to inflict those things, right? If you can't do that, you're never going to freeze them. This makes it a dead stat outright. And I noticed this while doing Uber Azaro, and I was like, that's really strange, I should be inflicting freeze, but I never was, because I was never removing the portion of his life required, because they have a lot less damage, or a lot more damage reduction, and so it doesn't work that way. This straight up makes these feel like a dead stat if you do not have the amount of the damage type required. So it's just unfortunate. I wish they clarified that, or at least made it different, right? Or they could have at least changed the wording and instead made it say your hits inflict, or your hits always freeze, shock, and ignite, right? Inflict is the key word there in the middle that makes this change, right? If inflict wasn't there, this would instead just make it always free, shock, and ignite regardless of your damage type. But the fact that they have inflict means that they change your value from 10% to 100% chance if you're doing the cold damage, the fire damage, or the lightning damage to actually inflict those shocks, those ignites, those freezes, right? It's unfortunate. Again, I hope they fix this and do something about this, but it is what it is. Anyway, again, thank you for watching the video. I hope this clarifies some problems. It makes up for at least the problems of it. I was going to do a build update and how I was like progressing really well and actually having a good time, but I ended up having to just stop playing and try and figure out this problem. I like spent like 10 hours on this, and I stopped progressing altogether to get this out there. So it is what it is. Sucks, but it is what it is. Anyway, though, you have a good day. Thank you for watching. Appreciate you. Bye.